Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're on with RobPatry on RobPatry Live. Boy, it's a warm day here in St. Andrews. It's been a hot week, but I think things are going to be chilling down. Not in the studio, of course. Here it's very, very warm as usual, but I think we're on an upswing. Winter's just around the corner. So this evening we've got an interesting night. The last couple of weeks we've been talking about Krista Beardy's debris cleanup on the water. A couple of weeks ago I mentioned it, and her and Bethany Young were on just a couple of weeks ago. So tonight we're going to devote a whole show to them. So the first thing I'm going to show you, this is out of my personal library at home, is this wonderful book by Farley Mowat called A Whale for the Killing. And if you haven't read it, I strongly suggest that you do. It's not specifically about debris. In fact, it's not about debris at all, but it is about the oceans, and it is about activism, and it is about people getting involved, and that's what we need. So tonight with us are Krista Beardy from the Huntsman Marine Science Centre and Bethany Young from the Nature Trust New Brunswick. Is it the Nature Trust or just Nature Trust?
The Nature Trust.
It is.
Most people say.
See, I had that problem with Batman and Titanic. I know there's really, it doesn't seem like there's a connection, but in the very first Batman movie, they were calling him the Batman, which threw me off.
True.
And in the movie, the Titanic, which we would say the Titanic, they just said Titanic.
Yes.
So it's Nature Trust. It's not the Nature or the
We usually
Nature.
say the.
Oh, you do say the?
We do, yeah.
Do you ever say the?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Okay. So yeah, I'm just going to put you on hold for 1 minute, but we will get to you. But see, I'm fascinated by this. What's Nature Trust New Brunswick?
Yeah, so the Nature Trust of New Brunswick.
Did I welcome both of you?
You
see,
did.
I don't have my glasses on tonight.
Welcoming. Yeah.
And it's hard enough for me to focus and concentrate on things, but without my glasses, I'm lost.
I feel welcome.
Yes.
You do feel welcome?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I did welcome you both.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on. Okay,
Yeah,
Nature New
thanks for having
Brunswick,
us.
what is that? What it's Nature Trust.
Yes, so the Nature Trust of New Brunswick is a provincial land conservation organization. So we have 50 nature preserves across the province that we protect. And we have stewards, so volunteers from the communities who come out to help us steward those properties and maintain them. And several of them, over 20, I would say, have trails that are maintained on them. So they come out and help with trail days, and we also do beach cleanups. So 16 of our nature preserves are in the Charlotte County area. Actually, sorry, it's 18, and along the Passamaquoddy Bay. So we do a lot of beach cleanups, like the one last weekend, the Great Fundy Coastal Cleanup in this area. We have lots of people involved, which is wonderful.
And that's how you connected with Krista. So you were both involved in this cleanup.
Yes.
And we talked a little bit, very briefly last week about it, because I was just curious as to how you had done. Now, we had talked about numbers, and you said, well, you wanted to wait.
We have numbers.
Because I forget, you said, you didn't want to publicize it until you had counted it all. Yeah,
we hadn't heard back from all of the groups last week, because it would happen on Saturday, and then the show was just.
So what are the numbers?
The numbers, so we had 203 participants come out, which was awesome.
Which is that a good?
Really great. That was awesome. Yeah.
Okay, and that's because I mentioned you on the show.
Exactly. See? Yeah.
So people do watch, which
Definitely.
is nice to.
I think so.
Nice to hear.
Yeah. And so there were 23 partners and participating organizations. Wonderful. And we had 261 or more bags of garbage, and that doesn't include the larger debris that didn't fit in garbage bags. Then we also had 52 bags of recycled plastic, rigid plastics and rope.
Okay.
And redeemables.
Now, when you say larger pieces, give us examples of that.
We had several groups find huge pieces of styrofoam that were like as tall as me.
Right. Just out there floating.
And like this wide or so. Yeah. Well, they were up on they get pushed up onto the shore with the high tide.
Okay. So now, before you go any further, if anybody wants to call in and has any questions for either Bethany or Krista or me, about general debris in the ocean and what we think of it and how we'd like to help their organizations and how we'd like to do more and more to clean this mess up, just give us a call at 855-529-8826. We'd love to hear from you. So now you're out there picking this stuff up. Like you said, a big piece of styrofoam. Now we don't know how long that's been out there. There's no way to sort of carbon date something.
Yeah.
Now I know before the show you were showing me some things that we can sort of establish how old they are, and we'll talk about that. But other things, you have no idea how long it's been out there.
No, it's hard. It's really hard to tell. Yeah, some of the pieces are pretty intact, so maybe you could assume that it's fairly fresh. Some of them have a lot of like growth on them and have started falling apart, like the styrofoam loses its beads. So,
but once those beads break down, Bethany, that just stays in the ocean anyway.
Yeah,
it's not like they dissolve.
No, it's a big problem. Yeah, absolutely.
So there must be tons and tons and tons of this stuff out there.
Yes.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
So now, what else did you pick up? Because I'm always fascinated by what was.
We found lots of different types of things. So lots of household items. Do you want to show
sorry to interrupt.
Oh no.
But the reason I want people to know what's picked up and why you bring stuff in is because we don't know, right? We're saying, it could be this or that, but it's everything. There's all sorts of trash out there.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Krista might be able to say more. She does like 5 cleanups a week, actually. So she's
your
well-versed.
week is spent cleaning up the beach areas.
I do choose a beach every day or so, and I take a bucket and my dog and go and do a quick cleanup,
right,
so to speak.
But you always find something.
Oh goodness, yes.
Have you ever gone down there and you're surprised to find nothing?
Not nothing.
Right.
I spent quite a bit of time this winter cleaning up Holt's Point, and I did have one day where I had left it a couple of extra days, and on my return I found it. There was still a bucket there, but I had to search for it a little harder. So I kind of felt like, oh hey, the work is paying off.
Right.
Like it's not accumulating. I'm taking it out piecemeal, stage by stage, and slowly it's being maintained. So that's kind of what we would like to do, especially with things like the shoreline cleanup. We have an idea of the different beaches that need attention, and we have a different idea every year of exactly how much attention they need based on the amount of garbage removed the prior year. And perhaps we could even, if people were looking for the data to that, they could find beaches that needed a little extra care and clean those up on their own time if they wanted to.
Now, are there, you say beaches, are there areas that do bring in more debris than others?
Oh, certainly.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And why would that be? Is it because of the tides?
Sometimes it's the angle of the beach, like it's facing, the way the wind normally comes, or the the big waves. That might be a factor, and just this.
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes a beach is mostly clean, and other times, and the beach just down the road from it is a trash bag.
Right.
It's funny how that is, but it is got something to do with the way the beach is setting and perhaps the prevailing winds, the direction they come in. Because a lot of the plastic garbage we get is floatable plastics. So some plastics float, some plastics sink, and a lot of them, one or the other, do both as well. So I think it's also a lot of wind.
And it's something, it's 365 days a year. It doesn't stop.
That's right.
It doesn't stop.
It's always there. Now, in the summertime, and obviously there's more people in the area and more visitors and campers and boaters out there, does that increase through those summer months?
I feel it does increase, but it changes the source. So I find a little bit more is on the consumer debris. Things that are just left behind on the beach because that's the easiest thing to do. Perhaps they weren't from the ocean, so they had yet to become marine debris, but are about to become marine debris.
Right.
Just down here in between Indian Point and Pagan Point, you see a lot of picnic tables, and you see a lot of waste receptacles, but quite often in the mornings when I go out that way, you find people's picnic leftovers already still sitting on the tables where they had been left, just waiting for a gust of wind to send them right into the ocean.
So it's just people not doing their due diligence, picking up their post-picnic debris and tossing it in a receptacle box. And that's something we have to do for ourselves. I mean, you have to constantly, I guess, make people aware of that you have to pick up. It just, there's not somebody that, you know, and people may be under the impression that, oh, you know, after we're gone, there's a cleanup crew that comes and picks that all up, but there isn't.
There isn't, and I think I mentioned before on the show that St. Andrews makes it easy. It's one of those places where there's a garbage can every few meters and there's a recycling bin, and they just make it so easy, and it's disheartening when people don't take the time to go that extra 3 or 4 feet to put something in the proper bin.
Well, do you know, and it's funny you say that, but 11 years ago, we came through here, my wife and I, on a trip to the Maritimes, and I remember stopping in New Brunswick, and really nothing to do with the water, but I remember taking the dog for a walk, and they had, you know, garbage bins with, you know, well, I call them poo-poo bags. I don't know if they have an official name, but they had bags, you know, and they had garbage that you could open and close and put that. So I think that we're, you know, this province is very forward when it comes to the concepts and ideas of cleanup and getting people involved, but you have to get involved.
Exactly.
You know, it's the old, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force him to drink. You can put the garbage can there, but we as people and people of the province or who live here or who visit here have to take that little extra effort to pick it up and dispose of it, because if it's on the beach, the next step is it's going to get in the water. Right,
exactly. And you got to wonder where, what is the best for that, of course, is to go into the garbage or into the recycling stream. And of course, with St. Andrews here too, we've got the big dumpster down by the beach here where the campground is, and it's fenced in, and it says on it, beach litter only, or beach garbage only. So it encourages people to go down there and pick up a few pieces of styrofoam or a couple of floating pieces of plastic, and it gives them that extra bin to heave it into. So I think that's fantastic.
And I'm sure over the years it's gotten better. I would like to think that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, nobody even cared. I mean, people would just use the ocean, the rivers, the St. Croix River, I mean, the Great Lakes as garbage receptacles. You know, you dumped it in, and companies were putting toxic chemicals into the water. But now, over the years and over time, we have to pay back. We have to help.
Yeah, we are still finding things like you were saying. There used to be dumps like right at the water's edge. So like at P Point, which is in Blacks Harbour, we have a nature preserve there. Connors Brothers at P Point Nature Preserve, and it was an old dump site. So we're still like actually in the water. So we're still like, whenever the tide comes in and it brings more debris, and it moves the sand around, so you find things that were buried. It's strange. There's like last year we found 30 leather shoe soles there.
Right.
Like 30. That was wild.
At least it's an even number,
one spot.
right? It'd be worse, I think.
Roughly 30. Maybe 31.
Okay.
And there were also like dishwashers and things that were like a bunch of coils and lots of interesting things that are buried there.
Well, I've heard, and again, has really nothing to do with this, but then it makes you think that back in the day when St. Stephen, was more into shipbuilding, that there are enormous piles of sawdust at the bottom of the St. Croix River in spots. It's feet deep of sawdust that's been sitting there for literally centuries. And it doesn't go away. I mean, that stuff has now changed the ecosystem. And all this stuff does.
Oh, it does. Yeah, it changes it drastically. My focus is particularly on plastics because unlike metal and wood and other debris, it tends to stick around for a lot longer time. And when it's up on the shoreline, which is the importance of our shoreline cleanup, it tends to degrade a lot faster than what it would in the ocean. Once it's in the ocean, it's at a cold temperature, it'll sink eventually, and low oxygen, it doesn't degrade at all, barely. I'll show you some samples in a moment. But we're on the beach where it's got the direct sun rays, it goes under a process of oxidation and photodegradation, so it can turn into microplastics much faster that way. And along with the Bay of Fundy tidal motions and with the waves and the currents in this area, it's just a recipe for plastic beaches.
Yeah.
And when you get a lot of microplastics in the sediment, it changes the constitution of the benthic area, which can change the temperature. For one thing is the temperature is lower in sediments that are high in microplastics, which affects what kind of creatures can live there and what kind of plants can grow there. And it can also change other things. For instance, I had read a study at one point where the decreased temperature because of the microplastics was causing a differential in the sex of turtle eggs. When the turtles were born, it was affecting basically the reproductive success of the turtles
the
themselves.
breakdown of the plastic?
Yeah, causing such a change in the sediments. Yeah.
I believe it. I mean, it must affect something.
Exactly. It has to affect something. And that's something that was lost historically. It's like, if we toss it overboard, it's gone. Because relatively speaking, it's a drop in the bucket. But after how long of that kind of practice, it's no longer a drop in the bucket. It is the bucket. It's
And I remember within the last 10, 15 years reading an article in the newspaper about them going into landfill sites and looking at the garbage that was there. And they would open up plastic bags because, you know, it's that expression, out of sight, out of mind. And I believe that they would open up the garbage bags and everything was intact, pretty much. You know, not only we knew that sort of diapers and plastic containers that we throw away would remain intact, but even pieces of bread from 30, 40 years ago had not degraded because it's in this perfect little garbage bag and it just stays the same and nothing eats it. It doesn't, you know. So imagine in the water, and the water, our oceans are, again, and we talked about this very briefly last week, but there are animals, there are living beings there. Fish, crustaceans, mollusks, plankton, seaweed, everything that rely on this ecosystem that's been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and all of a sudden we're throwing in something completely different that can really damage them.
Now, if you want to flip that around, we're damaging that for them, but at the end of the day, especially in the face of climate change, we're destroying the oceans, which is going to be our saving grace.
Right.
We're going to need that ocean.
Yeah.
We're going to need that for climate regulation. We're going to need that to clean our air. That primary productivity is so super important to the human race, as well as everything else on the planet. So it goes both ways in that respect.
And we have to become, and we talked again about, in stewardship of the planet, that it is our responsibility. And it's not really, doesn't take a lot to, at the end of the day, say, here's some garbage, put it in a receptacle. Because obviously, as again, we talked about, you know, on a boat, somebody puts a bottle, they're careless or it's accidental, it's going to blow away and that's going to happen. But there's a huge amount, I would suspect, that's put there on purpose.
Yeah.
You know,
Quite possibly.
and then it becomes a real problem over time, and then we're hurting ourselves in the long run.
Right. And it is a bit of a two-edged sword there too, as far as tossing it overboard or tossing it even on the side of the road, because it'll eventually, everything makes it to the ocean anyways, or some body of water, which eventually takes it to the ocean.
Exactly.
But every year we have, well, at this point, I think 300 million tons of plastic produced, or more than that, I think, actually. That was 2 years ago, that was the number. And we're increasing a lot still in that production. And the amount that's making it back into the recycling stream is not increasing the way to make up for that extra production.
Right.
So we're tossing things in the water that could be used again. And when you think of it, plastic is pretty much a petroleum product. And what we're doing is we're tossing out petroleum products that can be used to remake themselves, but yet we're relying on the oil and gas industry. 8%, I think, is the production level of oil and gas that goes into plastic production globally. So that 8% has to be remade every year instead of us recycling that back into the system. So we're relying on extra oil and gas work at that point as well. So that's kind of a
And then once it's in the system, it just it perpetuates, and
It does.
and in the water it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't dissolve.
No, it's useless as far as being reused, and it's harmful to the ocean.
And a lot of this stuff is found in fish, and
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
because you were saying it gets caught in their stomachs, and
Oh yeah. No. Often different types of feeders are not the most discriminate when it comes to what they eat, and something that mimics food or looks like food or is the same color, whether it's a piece of white plastic or a piece of blue plastic. Different organisms prefer different things, and if they find what it is they're looking for, it's like, oh, that's food. And then they'll eat that and then be unable to digest it. So you can imagine how having a stomach full of plastic, which you can ingest but not egest, and it slowly builds up until you get a situation that's called pseudo-satiation, which is basically just another word for, I feel full, I'm not going to eat now.
right.
So the fish or the bird will have a stomach full of non-nutritive items and then not have any more room for anything that would be nutritious.
And then if a bird eats something, and then I don't know the exact biology of it, but I mean a bigger fish or a shark or something
Bigger
might
bird.
grab
Yeah.
the bird. He's now ingested that.
Yeah.
So it just goes on and on.
It goes on and
Absolutely.
on, and it starts at the smallest level as far as the ocean is concerned. We have phytoplankton, and they might not eat the plastic particles, like we're talking nanoplastics and microplastics, really small, can't see it with the naked eye kind of plastic. That can stick to the phytoplankton, and you got a zooplankton who's going to come along and eat 10 phytoplankton, and then
Right.
the zooplankton's full of it. And then you kind of amplify that all the way up to like the whale who comes, the filter feeders, and they'll eat tons of plankton at once, and that is just being brought into their systems all together at one time. So you have that sense of magnification. And it's not just the plastics, it's the amount of chemicals that can adsorb to the plastic. So PCBs, DDT, BPA, which is something everybody's terrified of as far as having it in your water bottles, but it makes its way back into the system in industrial processes, and then
Right.
finds its way into the ocean and finds its way into the food stream through our fish.
Now that thing you meant, was it BP?
BPA.
Yeah.
Yeah, that. Now that's what they say BPA free.
Yes.
Now, right?
Yeah.
But if you have a bottle, which I think we'll see later, that's from 15 years ago, it probably has that in it, right?
Oh, probably.
And it's sitting
It's-
there.
Yeah.
Like that hasn't stopped.
That hasn't stopped, for sure. And another thing, as far as that's concerned, is additives to plastics. So a lot of the plastics you're going to see tonight, they have things put in the plastics, because plastic itself is kind of a biologically inert thing. It doesn't really hurt us. It mechanically can hurt something if it eats it, but it's not technically poisonous in that sense. However, there's additives put into this plastic. Some of it is so that it's UV resistant, for instance, which would make it even harder to break down on a beach.
Right.
And
Like a buoy
sometimes,
or something that has
yeah, something that
supposed to be in the sun. Yeah.
exactly. Or some of it has antimicrobial properties, like a change table. Change tables are made out of plastic, and they always have that big sticker on the side saying antimicrobial or microbe resistant.
Right.
And it's made as an antibacterial, which again is going to introduce another chemical into the environment while making itself even more durable.
Right. No, I know exactly
Know
what
what I
you
mean?
said. No, and it's true.
Scary.
Yeah.
Reality.
Yeah, and there are plasticizers that are out there to increase the durability of plastics. There are plasticizers that make it more heat resistant. So there's different types of plastic, and there's different types of additives to all these plastics.
So that, I guess what you're saying in essence is that every time we change the plastic to improve our life or lifestyle, we're causing a problem somewhere else. It's a ripple effect.
Yep. Very much
You know, every action has a reaction. I'm bringing up all sorts of cliches tonight, but it's true.
It is true, yeah.
Yeah,
You're
you know,
right.
because like you said, they're changing, and that never even occurred to me.
Yeah.
That you're changing the chemistry of the plastic, which is now in the water, which will affect things. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back with Bethany and Krista, we're going to start to take a look at some of this garbage. Okay, so we're back with RobPatry Live. Tonight we're talking about the oceans, we're talking about the beaches, we're talking about the land around and what people do and what happens through accident and what's done on purpose. And we're here with Krista Beardy and Bethany Young. So you've got some stuff to show us, some debris that has been picked up.
Yes.
I do.
So this should be interesting. I always love, well, you know what, and I shouldn't say I love seeing garbage, but at least it's not out there. Now, the last time you were here, and you had brought some, you had like a coffee cup, and you said to me, well, see, Rob, this will dissolve over time and break down, but it doesn't because there's a piece of plastic,
right in the middle.
a very thin layer.
Yeah.
Well, that was, see, I still think about that.
That's a surprise for a lot of people, seeing the different stages of degradation of a plain old Tim Hortons cup, because it's something you see on the roadside all the time.
Right.
So you know that once that little bit of paper is off of there, that little insulative layer, there's a big plastic ring in the middle, and there's a film on the inside.
Right.
So that's often a bit surprising. So this is what a part of my job is, to try to bring a bit more understanding and a bit more education to the public as to exactly what it is they're doing, inadvertently often.
Right.
Right?
Because it's not always, somebody is not always saying, well, here's a cup, I'm going to throw it in the water, but they may say, well, this is made of paper.
It'll dissolve.
It'll dissolve, and then 375 years later,
it's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes people don't realize the extent of the damage that they're doing in what they're doing. And a good example of that is celebrations, which I talked about briefly the last time I was on too, with the firecrackers.
And the little duck.
And the duck from the duck race.
Which you took away from me.
Which I did.
What did happen to him?
One of our kids used him in his marine debris art project.
Okay.
So I have a couple of pictures on
now,
my
can
Twitter.
you contact the child and ask him for the duck back?
I don't think I'll do that. No, it's his
break
duck
his
now.
heart. All right. See, I always end up suffering.
Oh.
Because you know what? I got attached to the little
really
duck.
liked the
I
duck.
did.
Oh.
Sweet.
Well, maybe you'll find another one.
It'll be all yours. I promise. It's spoken
thanks.
for. Yeah.
Okay, so what have we got here?
So back onto the celebratory thing that people don't often realize.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, I did a kayak tour through the Musquash Marsh with Fundy Baykeeper and the Conservation Council of New Brunswick.
Yeah.
And I found a couple of balloons along the way. So I'm pretty sure the people that were celebrating this happy birthday did not mean for this to make it into an estuary sanctuary.
Right.
Place that is home to many birds and fish, and we saw porpoises.
That's awesome.
Porpoise?
It was awesome.
Porpoise?
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 No, are porpoises dolphins? Is that the same thing?
It's kind of in the same family, but a little different.
Okay.
But yes, balloons. So this one here is obviously a little newer. They're not from the same thing.
Okay,
but
so see, you know what I noticed? First thing is it says, caution, water can cause the inks to bleed. So they're out in the water and all this ink is
bleeding.
Well, yeah, exactly. And it's funny that is their main concern, is that the water causes the ink to bleed, to bleed through the balloon and lose its color, when in fact that could be killing something else.
But I'm sure what occurs, and if I can use a little detective work here,
sure.
that somebody they go to the store and they buy one of these and they fill it up with, I guess it's helium because that floats, and then they go down to the park and they tie it to a picnic table, and then all of a sudden it loosens up and it floats up in the air and it's gone. And, oh, well, isn't that nice? It's gone. But it isn't gone.
It's not gone.
It's going to come down at some point. And when you're surrounded by water, as New Brunswick is, well, as most of the planet is, it's going to end up there.
It's going to make it into the waterway eventually, exactly. So between being an ingestion hazard, given the way it looks, okay, so it's a little brightly colored and maybe doesn't look too appetizing, but here's one that, and look at the rest of the twine there, of course, is the entanglement hazard. But here's one here that I found a couple of weeks back in Holt's Point. This one has lost all of its coloring. Now it still has a little bit kind of on the bottom. But picture that in water.
Well, that to me, see, now if I was a fish, and I think I mentioned last week I'm not.
No.
I'm a mammal. But if I was a fish and I was floating and swimming around and I saw, see, I would think that's like a jellyfish or a flounder or something. And I'm gonna take a bite out of that.
If I put that in an
Absolutely.
aquarium at work,
People will.
people will assume it's a jellyfish.
Yeah.
It looks very much like a jellyfish.
And I'll
if you're
tell
not
you.
fooling us, and you're not fooling
Yeah, and it
the
takes
fish
on
that
the
eat it.
color of what's around it too. So
I'll tell you, and I'm
flashes.
honest. I'm a very honest person. If I'm in the water, and I rarely go in the water, I mean, never, because I'm afraid of what's in there. But if I was in the water and that thing come floating up to me, I'd be running out, Portuguese man of war, everybody out of the water.
Yeah.
Good that is
Yeah.
creepy.
And
And that started out as this.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So this is mylar, and mylar, of course, is in many of our products, and it looks like it's like a tin foil type of thing. So people think it is kind of a friendlier item because it is tin foil and is recyclable. And in some places it is recyclable, but as far as it goes, it really is just a little bit of a tin foily bit of a plastic thing.
Okay, so this, and you did the same thing with a cup, this will end up like this.
That's the progression, yeah.
And all this ink and poisonous paints and colors will just be
That
in the
floats
water.
off, yep.
Wow.
And then, of course, there's also these lovely pieces of ribbon that are also very bad, very, very bad. But yeah, so I'm not sure how long this had been in there. That's one thing that's hard to tell when it comes to marine debris is how long something has been in there. But I
Right.
found something the other day. I don't know if you guys, you can't close up this
It's
far,
very
I'm sure.
small, yeah.
It's very small, but it is a metal Quest cap from a Pepsi Cola product that gives me $10 off a $50 purchase at Foot Locker.
wow.
Need some new kicks.
Yeah.
Right.
And this expires on November 30th, 2000.
So 17 years
So
ago.
that's been floating around for a little bit. That's
Now,
been around
and you
for a
can still
while.
read it.
And I can still read the paint on that. The pigment is still in it. And it's showing signs of wear. It's probably not as flexible as it used to be, but it's definitely an intact piece of plastic. But I also have a bit more of an extreme example here.
Okay.
And this guy, we were just looking at this and remarking about this a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of new to me. This is a bottle of dish detergent.
Yes.
It's called Mir, spelt M-I-R.
Yeah.
And we did a quick Google search. Bethany did a quick Google search for me to see when this would have been around, and this is from the 60s.
Yeah.
This is when this was.
Yeah, I remember seeing that, and it would come in different colored bottles.
Yep.
And
So it'd be like a yellow bottle
Yeah,
and a green
exactly.
bottle. And so it's been floating around for 30, 40 years.
Yes, it says on it still, you can still read it. It says, enjoy the delightful difference. But you can see, now this is, of course, was a pretty hardy piece of plastic to start with, probably much like what we have now for our detergent. But you can see how much it's basically tearing and cracking as the plasticizers and the additives have been leaching out of it.
Right.
So this is a different plastic now than how it started because it's got that brittleness as pieces.
But then again, Krista, when that was manufactured, the bottle itself or the container 40 years ago, companies then didn't worry about these BPA? Is it?
They wouldn't have been worrying about.
They wouldn't worry about that. They wouldn't
No.
worry about the type of ink, whether it had lead in
No.
it or whether it nuclear waste. I mean, they
Right.
just
Wasn't a
didn't.
concern,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
over the years we've improved all that and things are getting better, but we're still living with some of the sins of our
We
past.
certainly are. Now, I think the first early plastic that was used kind of in a domestic way was, I think it was 1907 with Bakelite. But it really wasn't mass produced the way it is today until probably the 40s or 50s. So this would have been within a decade or so of the real mass producing, getting away from glass containers and going for the plastic. And you're right, everything that was made, all plastic that basically has been in existence since the early 1900s is still in existence out there today.
Right.
Whether it's still a big piece of plastic or whether it's like a nanoplastic, microplastic.
It's still out
It's
there.
still out
Now, where did you find that? Was that in the water or on a beach on the land?
This one here was actually at the aquarium and somebody else had found that. Now this is another one here.
Yeah,
that I
that was
found
kind of creepy.
recently. This is also an old octagon liquid economy size detergent for washing dishes and fine fabrics. Another item that's been around for decades that can wash up. And I think I mentioned I found a bottle of shampoo that Avon had discontinued about 20 years ago once.
Now, this is made by Palmolive, And you can certainly see by the lettering on it. That's just, how did you find out how old this?
I didn't find out that one, no.
I have a
But that's still
feeling
pretty
this
old.
is as old as
Pretty
that or
old.
older.
Yeah.
On the
I
next
mean-
break,
It's still
we'll quickly do a
completely
search.
intact. Yeah, we can.
Yeah,
look
even the
that up.
cap is intact.
you found the cap.
It's a bit brittle, but it's still what it was. But you know, this is something that was probably discarded a matter of months ago.
Right.
And that is not going to look too much different. It is thinner plastic.
In 30 years
But
from now.
think about this in 30 years from now. You know, if it's still intact, it's going to look like one of these, or worse, it's going to be a microplastic.
You know how I don't know what the process is called for fishing, but there's a process where they throw these big nets out there and they scoop up all these fish. And I was thinking while you're talking, geez, I'm sure if you did that and you dredged the stuff that would come up. Of course, you get a whole bunch of fish in there, which wouldn't be helpful. But you know, just to get all that that stuff.
Yeah, there's
out.
actually a young man who did a project on it's basically like a little vacuum. Have you heard about that? And it sucks in debris.
Right.
I don't know. So they're doing research on that in Europe to see if that can be a way of trying to get rid of some of the floating plastics.
Oh, like pulling the plastics in and having like a
and there's
sieve
a filter.
or okay.
I remember when BP, British Petroleum, had that problem in the Gulf with the little oil leak. I don't know if you heard about that.
Yeah.
And I know actor Kevin Costner was involved in some type of a skimming machine that could pick up oil, and kind of reminds me of that. But Patrick had a question in my ear about, on boats themselves, are people aware, or do they educate people who go out on a boat to say, geez, you know, if you know, because I guess some boats have a little kitchen in it, or people are having their sandwich or their cup of Tim's, you know, to say, you know, put this in a blue box, or put this in a box with we get a little fish on it or something. Don't just toss it out there. Are there some kind of regulations for that, or?
Nothing big and enforceable as what you would like.
Right.
There isn't. There's education. I've, for one, have put up signage at the local small craft harbors warning about the effects of marine debris. And I usually approach it from a fisheries perspective. So I think my signs say something to the effect of marine debris damages marine habitat. So help protect our fisheries. And then I have a small blurb about where to take your garbage and where to take your recycling. So the signs are out there, the education is out there. We're still building on that education, which is why I'm here tonight, and which is why we do what we do in the groups that we do it in, is to try to bring more public awareness to this. And with public awareness, you're not going to reach everybody. There's always going to be your holdouts who are like, too bad, I'm put it in the ocean. But the more people around them who disagree, the more that people are policing people.
Exactly.
So I hate to refer to the whole shaming aspect of it, but if somebody, like for instance, the cigarette butts, it is still an acceptable form of litter that ends up in the ocean.
It's probably the most toxic of everything you could put in.
And people are still, you know, letting them fly everywhere.
Well, I read somewhere that, because I was talking to Cynthia about that when I was up at the aquarium in last March. There's something like 4 trillion. And I mean, it sounds like almost an impossible number, but if you divide it all out, it works.
It works.
Of these little cigarette filter butt things, you know, that people smoke. Ooh. And that's something that people just do.
Yeah.
You know, you go to the beach, you know, well, I don't, because I don't smoke. But if I did, I'd bring a little ashtray or something.
Exactly.
But
I'm not coming down on smokers. But
no, but I mean, people will put them in the sand. People, they just think that's just a natural thing that I guess must dissolve.
Well, they see the paper on the outside of the filter, and they see the paper.
But it's
and
that
then
stuff
the tobacco.
inside.
The stuff inside is plastic, and it's a plastic fiber that when you're with high heat, you're bringing in all the additives from your cigarette, and it's all binding to that plastic.
And that's going in your lungs.
And that's going to,
you know, we'll save that.
What escapes goes in your lungs.
We'll save that for another show. But it is
Health
important
show.
to know that
Yeah.
if it's either going there or it's going somewhere else.
Right.
Right.
It's getting filtered out in that filter, and that filter is going in the ocean, and it's the perfect size for a small fish to show some interest.
Okay, so what else? What's that black plastic thing there?
This
What's
here,
that?
oh, you go for that.
Sure. This one is,
Yeah.
and we have another
We have
yellow
another
one too.
yellow
What
one.
are those?
So those are, Krista was saying they're from the like a lobster trap. They're the doors.
Oh, the little
to-
door.
The doors
take
on the side.
The lobsters out.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
ended up escaping the traps quite a lot, these doors. I find quite a few of those on the beaches.
Right.
Now, back
Yeah.
in the day when they used to make wooden traps, and they were sort of like rope inside,
Mm-hmm.
I guess that would have been okay because it would
Yeah, it's
over
more
time.
natural, certainly.
Yeah. But now
Yeah.
it's saying, well, you know, for lobster fishermen, and I mean, I know it's a hard job and it's probably
Yeah.
expensive to buy wooden ones, but this type of plastic, again, gets in there.
Yeah.
And when lobster guys are out there, or scallop guys, or haddock guys, or halibut guys, and they're on their boats, are they aware of this stuff?
We're trying to make it so that they are.
Because the fishermen also, and I'm sure they're a very small minority, but it's
Yeah.
still part of the whole system.
Yeah. Now, Nova Scotia has a program called Ship to Shore, and that was the brainchild of Clean Nova Scotia, and they've got together and they have come up with an education program for fishermen and people in fishing and aquaculture industries that just lets them know what's going on and makes it easier for them to find waste management options.
Right.
So that is something that we are looking to start up in Nova Scotia, but in New Brunswick, but it's kind of a slow process, but we're kind of in the beginning stages of planning possibilities to make that easier.
Now, I know Patrick, he's opening up a diving shop here in St. Andrews, and he's a very avid diver and teacher and enthusiast. Now, do some of you guys, not specifically you two, but do some of your group dive and look for garbage?
Yes, absolutely. There was a group, part of the cleanup this year. They went out to Meredith Houseworth, so that's on Grand Manan, and they did a dive in Whale Cove to clean up debris in that area.
And what did they find down there?
It was actually a lot cleaner than last year. So last year they had probably 10 bags, similar things, mostly things that don't float as much, so they're sinking down. So it could be something like this, but covered in like it's been biofouled, so it gets heavy.
Right.
So covered in algae or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Or yeah, lots of ropes, fishing rope, and lots of like steel parts from like old engines or motors or things that people use for moorings
Right.
that are abandoned. So
And
yeah.
then do they bring it up with them?
They do, yeah. If it's not too heavy,
Right.
we don't want anyone getting hurt. but
Right.
yeah,
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, you can only bring up so much, but it must be fascinating what's down
Yeah,
there. Because
yeah.
Patrick has said he dives down there and you'll see tires and,
Oh yeah, yeah. It's
and all sorts
underwater
of
is
things.
just as much a mess, or probably more so than what we can actually see on the shores.
And then it doesn't come up, it just stays there
just-
forever,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
eternity. Okay, we're going to take one more break on the RobPatry Live Show. We're with Krista Beardy and Bethany Young, and we'll be right back after this break. Thank you for watching. Okay, I think we're back. I can't hear anything, so I assume we're back. We are back. Oh, now I can hear something, and I just got the message we're back. And you're watching RobPatry Live, Beardy and Bethany Young, and we're talking about debris. We're talking about the ocean. I just said to Krista, you guys are welcome back anytime, and I mean that because I think it's important. I think we need to get an update on this every now and then. And then we'll have you guys come on, and even if it's just talking about the things you found, because like here, there's forks, old forks and
Yes.
spoons and
Lots of straws.
straws.
Yeah.
Like this, I would assume is by the ton. Now I thought this was here, can I have
do you
that
wanna
thing
move
there?
that over?
I thought this was somebody. At first, I thought it was like a brain or a piece of brain coral, and I thought, what the heck is this? Well, this is an old piece of styrofoam, and you can see all the little kernels, if you will. I don't know what you call these things. They look like white niblets, green giant niblets.
Yeah.
But this, you know what? This is disgusting. And again, I can see, maybe a tuna, or I don't know how big. A tuna's got a big mouth, eh?
Yeah.
Or a shark, or
This one's a little bit sticky, but goodness knows how big this piece of styrofoam
don't let any
was.
toxic chemicals out into the
Well, yes,
studio,
be
because I
careful.
got to come back here next
Where's
week.
some breathers?
Yeah.
Where's some masks? But yeah, everybody has seen styrofoam
Oh, look how nice
like
and white
this.
it is on the inside.
It's so lovely on the
It is
inside.
beautiful.
It's closed foam here. But it flakes off bit by bit, because this could have been immense.
Yeah.
This could have been huge.
I know.
And it's rolling around the ocean, and with the
Grating
tidal
against the
action
rocks.
and the wave action,
Yeah.
it's grating against the rocks. And it's coming up in these small little bite-sized
Pieces.
plastics.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And it's absorbing all the chemicals around it, and then it's being eaten by the fish.
And these are things that day-to-day stuff that we live with, that we use every day.
Yeah.
It's not just strange oddities. So what was that, Bethany?
It's a little
comb.
mustache.
It's a mustache.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Is it really?
No, it's part of a comb.
Oh, it's a
Yeah.
comb.
It's
A
comb.
pocket comb.
Jeez, you know what? I'm sorry I even touched this.
Okay. I have one more thing to show you too.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to show you this too.
These are beakers.
The lobster
you didn't
bands.
found beakers.
No, I didn't find. I found.
Oh,
this
those,
for
I know what
Huntsman.
those are. Let me get, okay, so I know what those are, I think. Yeah, on his hand. It's not his hand. What do you call it? A claw.
The
Yeah.
lobster claw.
And you put those around there so that he can't, and there's billions of those out
It's
there.
ridiculous. There's billions of those out there. But
Okay, now, I have a question.
Okay.
How does it get out there? Because when they get the lobster, and he's in his little house there, his prison, I guess, before he meets his lobster maker,
Yeah.
the guy goes in there and he puts these bands on. So how does it get back in the water,
Okay.
you think?
I used to lobster fish occasionally.
Right.
When I got the chance, when I was living between Nova Scotia and PEI. And one of my jobs was the bait bags, which is a really dirty job.
Right.
And the other job was putting these on the lobster.
Okay.
So you reach in the trap, you pull out the lobster, and you've got these funny clipper kind of machine that you just squeeze, it opens up the rubber band, and
I
then you
see.
fit it on.
Right.
And it's kind of a sticky thing to use.
Right.
So sometimes it just goes
Oh, it
flinging
goes
off
flying
into space.
off, right.
Yeah, so that does happen.
Okay.
It does happen.
So it is something that, so there's probably millions and millions of those out there,
Probably.
all
There's-
over the place.
It's so common. But I think I've talked about microplastics a bit today, but I wanted to show you an example. I don't know if you can zoom in on this. That is a suspension of microplastics from a facial wash.
Where would I be, where would we see that, Doug? Is that on this camera here, or can we zoom in? Because that looks pretty disgosting.
And that's plastic beads that are just
If we can't get
floating
it, no
about
problem, but
in
there it is,
suspension.
Patrick.
Maybe hold it closer. Or no.
And, okay, that is, what is that? That's,
That is micro beads from a facial cleanser. Once I take it out of the gel and suspend it in a liquid with a bit of soap to kind of break things up,
Right.
you can see exactly how these kind of stay put in the water column.
so is this like what you'd call an exfoliant?
That's an exfoliant.
So you said on my face all the time.
Yeah. I hope you use
How does
ground
it-
almonds or
that's-
oatmeal or something like that.
Absolutely. That's how I keep
Apricots.
my
Yeah.
Apricots,
youngish appearance.
Yeah.
No, I mean, okay, so so this just stays in suspension
It
for
stays in
eternity.
suspension. Yeah, and that there is a small dab of a
Jeez.
product. Some of
Thank
these
you,
products
Patrick.
can have the consistency that is so gritty that up to 100,000 of those small particles can be sent down our drains with every use. So your every shower, we're talking 100,000 pieces
So
of
that just
plastic.
goes down the drain.
It goes down the drain.
And then it ends up in the ocean.
It's too small to be filtered out with the Canadian wastewater treatment systems.
Now,
Those ones.
okay, you know those whales, those big whales?
Yes.
Well, I guess they're all big. But there's some that have like,
Baleen.
yes. Now, and they take in now they'd be taking in all this
It
crud,
would
right?
be, yeah.
And
This
I hear
is-
about these right whales, and
Yeah.
I've noticed you've posted on there, horrible.
Yes, it is.
But I mean, things like that could be happening.
yeah, yeah.
And the time that it takes to connect it, you know, more and more are dying. But
Yeah.
this is getting into their system.
It
and
totally is.
that doesn't digest.
No, that,
And it's-
and it carries so many other harmful things in it as well. It's not good.
Horrible.
Yeah.
And what's this thing?
Oh, that is from, I think it's one of those skeet shooting charges. I'm only saying that because I pick them up by the thousands near a skeet shooting place in Nova Scotia that I live close to. But in my other beakers here, I
Yes.
have happy news.
What is it?
This here is
Happy news.
Happy news. This is recycled fishing gear
Okay.
that is being turned back into a usable product and being shipped for production. So that is provided by Fundy Plastics.
Okay.
And that is a high density plastic. So that is something that would probably sink in the ocean or kind of remain kind of in the water column for a little while before being fouled and sinking down. And this is the recyclable low density. So more of your straps and your bottles and your milk jugs. And these are also going to the recycling plant, and they get cleaned up and chopped up into this, and then they get sent away to be reused the way they should be.
Okay. Yeah, Patrick tells me we're almost out of time here, and you know what? I love this stuff. Well, I mean, I don't like how it has occurred, but I think that it's important. And like I said, you're both welcome anytime, because
Thank you.
I
Thank
think
you.
this will be my new cause célèbre, or is that what they call
Right.
that? But
Yeah.
I really think it's so important that people see this, and it hits home. You know, it's one thing to see, well, these are lobster claw things, and well, that has nothing to do with me. But you see a fork or a spoon or a comb, that could be anything or anybody. Plus something that your grandmother threw out 40 years ago is still
Right.
out
It's still
there.
hanging
Yeah.
out.
You know, I'm sure you're going to find all sorts of stuff. And you know, it's funny. Jeff Irving, who's been on my show, he's a sort of a local historian. Was not sort of, he is, and he goes to islands and he'll find Spanish coins and things like that.
wow.
People have always been sort of tossing stuff or dropping stuff,
Yeah.
but not to this degree, and not with this plastic.
Yeah.
Because at least if it's a piece of wood or something else, it'll float to the bottom and that's it. But this stuff is just, it's horrendous
Yeah.
what happens. So I guess that's about the end of the show, is it, Patrick? We've reached. Well, thank you so much, Krista.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bethany.
If I could say something, if
Please.
anyone wants to be involved in helping us clean this up, the Nature Trust of New Brunswick and the Huntsman Marine Science Centre, we're always looking for helpers to be stewards of our nature preserves and different areas.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yes.
And anything we can do, if anybody has questions, call us in. We're going to have you guys back again, because I think it's important that we do and that we make people aware, and the show's over.